Hey everybody, welcome back. Mike from Spectre Comics here. As we do another video where we jump right into the comic creation process, we're going to walk through doing page 26 of issue 6 of Spectre Comics. Now, after completing page 25, moving on to page 26, we are now 4 pages away to completing issue 6 before the end of the year, as was one of my stated goals in an earlier video, actually several earlier videos. It is the first week of December. We have a couple weeks left to complete this comic book issue before the end of the year, and I really want to get that done. We got 4 weeks to go, a little less than 4 weeks now. But before we jump into that, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos. So this page has a little of everything. Following up on the video I did for page 25, which will be linked in the description below, where we were setting up the Spectre on the next phase of their adventure, I now have them actually leaving the Zebulon. And if you're new here, the Zebulon is the main carrier vessel, the main ship of the Spectre that they take on all their missions. I now have them actually leaving the Zebulon, taking the hijacked enemy ship, the Ori ship, and going off on the next phase of their adventure. So now we have the robots being put in charge of the Zebulon as the Spectre crew takes the Ori vessel and goes their separate ways, and the mission now splits off into 2 different factions. So the robots stay on the Zebulon to offer support to the mission. Now it's going to be long-range support because now they're in 2 different areas of space, but they're there to do what they can, and they will have their own storyline, which will follow as well. So we have the Spectre storyline, and we have the robots on the Zebulon storyline. So these are 2 now groups we are following separately. So this page, as I said, has a little of everything. We've got some interior shots, we've got some bridge scenes, some ship scenes, and we've got some exterior shots. And in the case of my comics, exterior means outer space. And this goes back to a previous video I did on the way I set up my template, where I always keep a layer of stars in my page. So I have outer space scenes. I'm going to go back to my template. I'm going to grab the star layer and use it as I need it for whatever panel has stars in it. So it's always, that was just a time-saving tip. I'll link that video in the description below as well. So an interesting thing about this page is that the first panel of this page has all of the characters, all of the Spectre crew and Arco in the same scene. And I didn't even realize this till I was making this video, but this is the last time this entire group is going to be together until the very end of the story. We now have 2 groups of characters that are splitting off on their own little storylines. They'll have to carry their own stories. And as the writer and creator, it is my responsibility to constantly check in with the different groups so we know what's going on between them in real time. So that'll be an interesting dynamic now of how I have to kind of, and I've already written this, so I kind of have a good idea of where it's going, but we're going to have to kind of check in at certain times between the groups of characters to see what they're doing, in real time. So that, at the same time the Spectre are doing this, what are the robots doing here? And again, as I said, the robots are going to be offering support to the crew that took the Ori vessel away, and how they do that will be an interesting kind of part of the story. So now, even between the Spectre going off in the Ori vessel, I've got the robots on the Zebulon kind of taking care of it. I've got the crew back on the Tabari homeworld, and I've got the Spectre and the Startle for Arco's Startle, which are kind of off on their own story. So now I've got 4 groups of characters that we have to check in with and follow. Now, some are a little more important to the story as we move the story along. Mostly we're going to be following the Spectre characters taking the Ori vessel and going away. But we will have to check in so you know as the reader, or so the reader knows, where the story is going and where everybody is at the same point in time. So it's going to be interesting. I'm actually going to do a video on how I organize my thoughts. I actually chart this out so I know where each character is at the same time in the story, so that when I check back in with them, I know what they're doing. And it makes it easier to write the story, because the more characters that or groups of characters that you force your reader to follow, the harder it is for the writer to kind of figure out, oh, I got to make sure I check in with these people. So my chart actually helps me make sure when I'm writing the story that I am checking in with each group of characters. So I'll do a video on that, a future video, where I explain and show you how I chart out the characters to keep the story moving and keep reminding myself to check in with certain characters at certain points in the story. So you'll also notice on this page that there's multiple items that I draw over and over again, and this is where my SketchUp modeling comes in. So I've got the Ori vessel spaceship, I've got the Zebulon spaceship. Those are 2 things that I've modeled in SketchUp, and I use the models to draw the ships on the page. There's one thing that I draw over and over again, which I haven't modeled, which I should, and I'll probably do a video on this also in the future, where we model the bridge in SketchUp, the bridge of the Zebulon. A lot of scenes in Spectre Comics take place on the bridge, And sometimes I mostly just draw it from memory. It would be much easier for me if I had that thing modeled and then I can rotate it for whatever scene I need it in. Because the problem is when I just drawing it from my memory, I know what it looks like in my head. I know what, but when I'm drawing it, sometimes I get the proportions wrong. Sometimes it looks really big, and everything that's in there, the various seats and desks and console stations that are in there are really spread out, and sometimes they're just really tightly packed. So from scene to scene, there's some inconsistency there about the space and the volume of the space, how big it is, how spread apart everything is. And I'd like that in the future to be a little more consistent. So I think I am going to do a video where I model that in SketchUp, and we'll kind of walk through the SketchUp process. If you ever want to use SketchUp for your, I've already done a video, which is linked in the description, on how I modeled a space that I used in the comic, one of the previous pages. But I'll do one for the bridge as well. It'll be a lot more interesting because we're doing something that's actually used over and over again in this comic. So Prox and Eco are two characters left on the Zebulon Bridge after the Spectre crew just left on the enemy vessel. Prox is one of my favorite characters to write for. His role is to be comic relief. He adds humor to whatever scene he's in. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's in your face, but his dialogue is just a blast to write for. So actually part of the scene is a carryover from some joke set up on the previous page. Whether he's talking to Eco, whether he's talking to Spark, whether he's talking to any other character, he's usually has a tone that just adds humor to the scene. Eco, on the other hand, is a different type of character. Of the 6 main Spectre characters, he's probably got the least impact on what goes on. He's kind of there as a side character, but he is part of the main group. Eco is one of the newer characters that I introduced into the group, and being new to the group, Prox kind of took him under his wing as kind of educating him to be a little more like he is. And Prox, being one of the older characters, is a little more soured on his role as a kind of a subservient robot. And he's trying to teach Eco that they're actually better than the Spectre. That's just an aside of their character development. But Eco is a challenging character. He's difficult to draw. Most of the time, he's this huge, hulking, bipedal robot that just kind of stands there. And a lot of times, he looks like he doesn't have any expression. He looks lifeless. So what I wanted to do on this page was kind of change that a little bit. And I'm trying to do this with all my characters, but I'm trying to get a little more expression into the characters so they look a little more real. You can actually see the pencil sketch underneath the final inks on this page that I changed the pose of Eco in this scene. I wanted to give him a little more animation and motion. I moved his arms around. I changed his body stature because I'm trying to give the character a little more expression without, instead of him just standing there looking, like I said, lifeless and bland. Some cartoonists, including myself, have a tendency to draw, and most of this is for like comic strips, but you tend to draw the characters as talking heads with just some dialogue. I wanted to kind of get away from that as much as possible as I've been going through the process of making comics. So I actually recently signed up to take a gesture drawing class online because I really wanted my characters to have a little more weight to them. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by adding weight to them? I want the characters to feel like they're alive. I wanted their motion to feel real and emotive and have gestures. If they were leaning against the wall or if they're carrying something heavy, I want to show the weight of that. I want to show, if they're in action, that gravity is a force that they have to contend with. So the whole thing about me it's just about me trying to improve my art, trying to improve the way I draw my characters, try to make the characters look and feel more real by the way that they're expressing themselves. My own criticism of my work is that a lot of my characters, I draw them in the simplest pose possible. I'm not challenging myself or something like that, but I want the characters to feel as real as possible. I want to be able to draw them at any angle. I want to, if their arm is here or here or here, I want to be able to draw that. And sometimes I've complained many times in these videos that I have difficulty drawing hands. I think a lot of people do, because the hand is a weird element with a lot of different, every hand motion looks different. It's not actually Eco's hand, as an example. Eco has a hand that looks like a mitten. He doesn't have fingers. He's got like a palm and a group of fingers, all together, and then a thumb. Much easier to draw that. I find I have no problem drawing his hand. But as soon as you add digits to the fingers. It's just so much harder to get the hand to look real, and it's always weird when you have to draw it in multiple different angles. So I've had a lot of trouble drawing hands as an example. So my goal is, the whole explanation, the whole reason I'm even mentioning this is I want to be able to draw my characters better and more realistic, as I'm trying to improve my art. I think I mentioned this in some earlier videos where if you go all the way back to issue 1 of Spectre Comics and you kind of look at the art in that issue, and then you look at the current issue 6 that I'm working on. And issue 1, by the way, was drawn many years ago. I've been doing this for a long time. The art is leaps and bounds above what I drew in issue 1, almost to the point where I want to go back and redraw issue 1, though I don't have time to do that, as I barely have enough time to work on the comics, the new stuff that I'm working on now. As I said, the goal is to get issue 6 done by the end of the year and start 2021 with drawing issue 7 and getting that going, because I've already scripted that. I've already started penciling it. Want to get that going. So it has been challenging to, the goal has been to get my art to improve as I go along. The problem with that over this long period of time is the consistency of the art from issue to issue, but I can live with it. It's not that bad, but it's definitely improved. You can definitely see an improvement in the art over the years. Issue 6, much better, much cleaner, much crisper. The drawings are better. The body shapes are better. Everything's better in these current issues. Issue 5 was an improvement from issue 4, and issue 6 is an improvement from issue 5. I'm sure issue 7 and 8 will be improvements over their predecessors. So we'll see how that goes. I also wanted to point out that one of the panels that I drew on this page is the interior of the Ori ship's cockpit, where as the Spectre are taking control of the vessel and then taking the ship away on their mission. That panel, I took the background from the previous page where I drew that panel on that scene on before. So this is one of the tips I gave in one of my earlier videos on time-saving tips, where I just reused a background from a previous drawing. It looks perfect. It looks exactly the way I want it. There is no reason for me to go and redraw that from scratch again. So that's one of the things I like about digitally drawing on a tablet. I can reuse my assets as much as possible. I keep a library of things that I draw or use over and over again, because once you draw it once, there's no reason to draw it 20 other times. We're not doing animation. This is just a scene, a background, and to save time on the page, as I told you, so these pages take a long time to draw. I just grabbed that whole background, modified it slightly for the new scene that I'm putting it in, and now I just insert the new character drawings in it, because now the characters are doing other things. They're sitting in different places. Just a great time-saving tip is just to reuse assets where you can. If you drew it perfect one time, you don't have to redraw it again. Use your assets over and over again. Your backgrounds, even some characters, can be used over and over again. Just copy them over into your sheet. So that's all I wanted to talk about related to my comic creation process for Spectre Comics page 26, issue 6. Page 27 is well underway. My goal is to actually have that completed by this weekend. It's the first week of December 2020. We're looking forward to putting 2020 in the rearview mirror and getting out of this horrible year. 2021, I expect, will be a much better year. I'm hoping it will be, at least. I hope you like the video. Subscribe to the channel. If you have a comment, leave it below. If you have any questions, comments, great thoughts, I would love to hear from you. So go ahead and leave that down there below. Videos I've talked about in this video will be linked in the description below, so go ahead and check those out if you haven't seen them. That's all. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.